Okay. Welcome again after a short break. I would like to introduce you Mr. Arseny Reutov. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. And he will talk about PHP object injection revisited. And if you get any question after or during lecture, just raise your hand and I will bring you a microphone. Okay, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone, my name is Arseny Reutov. I'm a web application security researcher from Russia. And today I will be talking about PHP object injection and some new ways of its exploitation. Thank you. So, thanks. Before we start, I would like to say a few words about me. As I said, I'm a web application security researcher. I do PHP and try to find some bugs in it. Also, I play CTFs, just loving it, and participate in some bug bounties. My presentation will be divided into 3 parts. The first one is boring stuff. This probably the stuff you know, how PHP object injection looks like, what it's about. The second part is some new stuff. It concerns primarily the new ways, something I found during one of the penetration tests. And the last one is some future stuff. You will learn some attacks that will maybe happen in future regarding PHP object injection. So, what about deserialized bugs? You know that it is 2013 and this type of bugs is not very common. But in fact, there are some vulnerabilities that were found recently. For example, that in Ruby and in Struts 2 and some others. And I want to show you that in PHP there is situation is still alive. All PHP object injection is connected with Egidio Romano, who introduced this term. It is on OWASP website. And he found some vulnerabilities in popular web applications such as InVision PowerBoard, Joomla, and KubeCard. However, all these vulnerabilities are based on the same principles and concepts that were introduced in 2009 by Stefan Esser in his work Shocking News in PHP Exploitation, which he presented in, if I'm not mistaken, Power of Community. And I would like to tell you in short what it means, to explain to you some basic concepts so that you will understand the next part. So, what a standard workflow of this bug looks like? First of all, we have a class with some properties. Then it is serialized. We get a string that represents this class. Then we post this string to vulnerable PHP web application, which deserializes this string using the function unserialize. And when PHP deserializes objects, each can do weird stuff. Each calls PHP magic, so-called PHP magic methods. There are plenty of them, and the most used and most popular method which is used in PHP object injection is, of course, destruct. Because destruct it is called when the object is freed, that is on its termination of the script. So if we inject an object, it will be automatically, the code inside destruct will be automatically executed. And very often in destructors there is code that can do such things that can lead to multiple vulnerabilities, such as full path disclosure to remote code execution, even this. Sorry. And this is example of one badge destruct that was used to do an RCE. It is cake PHP. Maybe you know it is PHP framework, kind of popular. And in this code, in destruct method, the framework writes its cache to a file, and the attacker can set his own properties, and the framework will write attacker control data to attacker control path, so we can write anything to anywhere. But I want to show that not only destruct can be used, and not only web application classes can be used, because all previous checks were based on the fact that an attacker can abuse some classes from web application scope. So it means that he can serialize a class from this application and abuse its destructors. I want to show that it is possible to exploit built-in PHP classes. Because you know PHP has some classes, for example, for handling databases, for SOAP, for multiple things. And these classes are in every PHP installation, and they are exposed to any script that is vulnerable to PHP object injection. So it makes this attack kind of universal. I want to start from the thing which led me to this discovery. One day I stumbled upon vBulletin. You know, it's a popular forum of web community software. Concretely, version 5, which is the newest version of vBulletin. And unlike the version 3, which was secure, and maybe 4, which has some vulnerabilities, in the 5th version, it is completely different, and there are many more features and classes and components. And in the directory core libraries, I found log4.php. It is a logging framework developed by Apache to manage the logs in easy, convenient way. And this component was not protected by any HTXS So I could execute any script within this path, and surprisingly, vBulletin developers did not delete the examples folder, which contained a lot of examples that executed some interesting stuff. I want also to tell about log4PHP, which is used by many software engines, such as CMS Made Simple, Sugar Serum, with Tiger. But in all these projects, the directory with examples is deleted. Unlike vBulletin, it is just cloned the repository, and that is why it was vulnerable only to it. So I had a bunch of scripts, and I needed to find something interesting. Yes, and one of these scripts was append socket server. It was a server that implemented log parsing. It received data and tried to unserialize it. So it had a local, so when you run the script, it launches the local server on port 4242, and it had a handler, net server handler log. This handler, a method on received data is executed. Then it does something with data, and this something is unserialized. So it just starts a local web server, receives data, and tries to unserialize it. So we have classic PHP object injection. But I didn't find any useful magic methods, no destructors in the user space of log4PHP. So I could not exploit it in any way. But if you see how but if you see that when the judge is deserialized and we get an object, in the code above, it executes the method getRootLogger. So we get an object, and this code tries to execute this method. And that is all that I got. So I decided just to loop through all the objects in PHP and try to find some interesting magic methods. Yes, this is a simple code. What it does, just simple loop over all classes defined in PHP user space. And I just searched for all the magic methods that these classes contain. I've got a bunch of magic methods, but practically all of them were useless. Like JTime and its wake up. Wake up is called every time the object is deserialized. For example, in var there is gstruct by PHP denies the serialization of this object, so I couldn't use it. And PDO also is blocked by PHP to serialize and serialize. But then I found SoapClient. This class is used to make SOAP calls, and this class defines a method, magic method call. What is special about this magic method? It is the thing is that it is triggered every time you try to execute a method on a class that this class does not have. So if we call blah blah on any method, on any class that implements call magic method, the code inside the call magic method will get executed. And remember that we have get root logger execution on the object that we just deserialized. So it fits perfectly to our schema. What we need to do is just to find something interesting in SoapClient, because in this particular case, it gets executed automatically without destructors. So I want to tell you more about SoapClient. VSGL is Web Services Description Language. It is used by SOAP to, it is kind of API that any SOAP client can handle so that it can construct some kind of bindings between the methods and the code, so to easier make SOAP calls. And SoapClient implements two modes of its operating. The first one is VSGL mode. In this case, SoapClient is initialized with VSGL, that is an API to the SOAP service. But in this case, PHP didn't implement proper serialization. So if we try to serialize SoapClient initialized in VSGL mode, it simply will not return anything, just empty string. This is because of PHP developers. And the second mode is non-VSGL. In this case, the SoapClient is initialized without any VSGL file. And in this case, PHP does serialization. So what we need. So we have only one mode. And the second argument to SoapClient besides mode are options. It is an associative array with many options, and when initialized in non-VSGL mode, there are two obligatory options, which is location and URI. So this object will get serialized, and we can do, for example, an XSS, and I will show how it is easier. You just initialize SoapClient with location, proper URI, use a checker controlled. The vBulletin will unserialize it, execute get logger name on this object, and PHP will trigger call method on SoapClient. When the call is triggered, SoapClient automatically does an HTTP request to our server. In my case, it's API PHP. And in API PHP, I just return HTTP status code 404, so not found. And in the message of this header, I just return my payload XSS or whichever. And when SoapClient sees not found, it generates SOAP fault exception because it didn't see any content, and outputs our string without any filtering. Yeah. This is the first. Also, SoapClient does not is prone to open-based bypass. It can cache vSGL files locally. So if we if you imagine that there is open-based defines this configuration property limits the path within which you can read files, include, or other file operations. So if web application is protected by open-based dir, and we can set, for example, we can set the property vSDL cache enable to true, so we enable caching of vSDL files. And then one option is cache vSDL, which enables caching. And when we make a call, open-based-dir is not checked. It just writes to the path you want. And in SoapClient, the most interesting vulnerability that I reported to PHP developers is XML external entities injection, which allows to read any files on the server. The scenario looks like this. We make the same SoapClient, but in XXE XML, we serve our evil XML file, which contains doc types and with entities that point to etc passwd, passwd, and this file and SoapClient just tells that doc types are not supported by SOAP, but I did not believe it. I thought that it could be exploited nevertheless, and I was true because using out-of-band technique of XML external entity injection, you can extract the files easily, despite the fact that SoapClient tells that doc type is not supported, which tells in a checker that XSC not possible. And I want to thank Alexey Osipov and Timur Yunusov from Positive Technologies who discovered this way of checking and which allowed to read files in vBulletin. Yes, we have this XML. I won't delve into how it works. You can see the presentation by Alexey and Timur from Black Hat and No Such Con, where they revealed this technique. I will just tell that it works perfectly. You can get any file on the server, even the configuration file of the vBulletin. And here is a short video. Sorry. This is Joomla, because I don't own a vBulletin license. I will show you Joomla. It is also vulnerable to this type of attacks. Before it was not possible to read files, only to, if I'm not mistaken, to delete some folders and SQL injection. With this technique, using SoapClient, you can read any file on the server. Now it generates a serialized string, base 44, and Joomla just gets parameter highlight, like in PHP BB in 2005, and unserializes this string. So in burp switch, I get the contents of the file. XSE just allows to read files using HTTP requests. It just uses interesting parameter entities which can redirect the contents of files through HTTP. So I redirected it to local burp suite just to show you how it works. In real life, you have a server which serves XML with XML external entities, and it logs any request that any requests. And in this, what is maybe not good about this technique is that it requires a method call on the unserialized object. So you can't get it to work if the vulnerable code does not execute a method, because we need it for call magic method. And a reasonable idea in this situation is to find such class which will have a property and will try to execute some method on this property. Unfortunately, I didn't find any such class in PHP that executed methods, a checker control message on objects. But using popular components such as Smarty, you can get it to work easily. In Smarty, there is a gstruct method which executes method release log on handler. So if we define our handler as SoapClient, so if we put SoapClient into handler, release log will be called on SoapClient, and the call method will be executed on SoapClient automatically. And here we use classic gstruct, which allows to execute, to realize PHP object injection without any interference, without any interference from vulnerable application. We just put a string, serialized object, and it gets executed automatically. Here is structure of classes, final structure of classes that allows to execute, to make HTTP requests with SoapClient. Yes, in this case, our XSE will be triggered automatically. I reported this vulnerability about 2 or 3 months ago, and PHP fixed it right away, and now it is fixed. In the third part, I want to tell you some words about some future things that maybe will be possible to do in some nearest future. It is yes. This is a question. Have you heard about any PHP framework that is implemented as a PHP module that is a C extension? Because every traditional frameworks are PHP based. Their code is written on PHP itself. But such frameworks exist, and I will explain to you why this approach is dangerous. This framework is Phalcon. Maybe you have heard or not. It is evolving framework that is getting popularity worldwide right now. Recently, it was included. Maybe not yet included, but there were talks to include it on Google App Engine, to cPanel as a C extension, because Phalcon is a framework that is implemented as a C extension. So you included just like other extensions like GD or FreeType or others. And why people choose it and why it gets popular? Because of its performance. It is written in C. C is fast, so everybody love it. And the fact is that the whole class user space, every single class of Phalcon is exposed to the user on the startup of PHP. So you run PHP info, and so if you try to get all the classes defined in the current scope, you will see that Phalcon classes are included. Even if you didn't include the files of Phalcon like other standard frameworks, because Phalcon does not have any classical files, it is a module. And on shared hostings, if Phalcon module is installed, every single class will be exposed to the attacker, so he can use the classes of Phalcon even if the user doesn't use Phalcon. If he is prone to unserialized to PHP object injection and he doesn't use Phalcon. So if we have an unserialized, we can do many things with Phalcon. On the left, you can see the list of all the classes with magic methods. And in this, among these classes, I found only single wake-up, which is executed on unserialization, that is automatically without any actions on the unserialized data. Yes, it is Phalcon logger adapter file. If you see the C code, you will find that all this code does is just it opens a file, reopens the file handler, which is associated with some logs, and just updates its internal property and sets the handler to the property. So in this code, we just have only fopen call with our path and mode. I started to think what one can do with fopen, just only to open a file, but you cannot read anything because it doesn't call any fwrite or something interesting. But the thing is that if you put an object in fopen, so PHP tries to open an object as a file, it will call the toString method on this object to extract the string representation of this class. And in Phalcon, there are plenty of toString methods, and I could. There were a lot of space for research at that moment. I went through some of the toStrings, but I could not find anything interesting. But in the end, I found Phalcon HTTP cookie and its toString method. I won't delve into the internals of Phalcon and its C code, but I can say that using this toString method, I managed to initialize arbitrary classes and execute arbitrary methods on these classes. So it was possible to do literally anything. And I just found a class in Phalcon. It is Phalcon MVC View Engine PHP, and its render method. In this method, what we have is a classic PHP include. Maybe you will notice line 108, there is a call of Phalcon require, and the path, the only argument, can be controlled by the checker. So I got PHP include, and here is a video demonstration of this vulnerability. So here is my serialized object, and there is PHP input that gets included. PHP input is just raw post data. Now I just make some conversions of this serialized object, because in PHP there are some characters like null byte which are hard to transmit over HTTP because they can be put in any way. So here I use verb switch, make a request to my page with Phalcon, and cookie gets unserialized the session parameter. You see that she's error because I sent 111, not a valid serialized string. Now I copy my huge serialized object with PHP input. And now I can write anything in raw post data that will get executed, any PHP code, like this PHP info, and it gets executed. You see the whole output of this function. In conclusion, what is the situation of PHP object injection? Currently, PHP tries to introduce some things that will help to protect web applications, to help developers to develop secure web applications and to regarding unserialize. For example, recently they just put it on the there was a voting whether or not PHP developers want to introduce a second argument to unserialize, which will restrict the type of data that will get unserialized. So you could put, for example, the constant PHP object, and thus you will allow the unserialized to deserialize objects, and if there is no such argument, any object that is deserialized won't get deserialized. However, this is the only approach, and I think that it is not right way, because you just don't need to unserialize user-supplied data. This is the only moral, and every developer should know it, that to let user define the data that will get to unserialize is not safe. It is not secure way. So here is my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.